Hey folks, everyone loves pirates here, and this is your Future of the Fortress summary for October. Of course, it's in November now, but can't go into the future, so you got to look at the past. And as always, I have nothing to do with the development of Dwarf Fortress. I'm just very interested in it, and lots of people on this channel are, so I provide summaries as have been requested for things like the monthly updates and the Future of the Fortress questions, which are essentially just people ask Toady anything they want to about Dwarf Fortress, and he pretty much answers every single question, which is kind of amazing. As always, or at least as recently, there seems to be, excuse me, there seems to be so many questions. I had to go into 2 pages of replies. I whittled them down to about 30, I think, maybe exactly 30. And if there's any other, essentially not everyone's interested in the same stuff. I try to pare it down to things I'm interested in, I think people viewing the channel may be interested in. But there's plenty more that I don't cover, so I highly recommend going to the thread on the forum and reading it all for yourself. All right, let's get started. So, question from Asin. Will we ever get another glimpse at the myth generator? I'm pretty sure more than a few players would like to mess around with it and see what happens. Toady quotes a DG reply that says, where Toady previously has said, I prefer not to do this. I think it both has the bar too high in some places, effectless, at least for release 1 probably, and too low in others, most everything else. It's not reflective enough of what I want to do, and I don't want expectations to coalesce around it over much. And then he also chimes in with, we'll be devlogging extensively during the big wait, and this will include myth stuff, but the standalone generator isn't going to be released, although standalone generation is something that'll be possible within the game, as with the current world gen. Makes sense, it's a prototype, he's working on it still, doesn't want to, over or under promise things. And of course, if we just be patient, we will have access to the whole kit and caboodle. All right. Question from What's If So What's It? Dwarves and various tropes myths are actually taken to be naturally resistant to many forms of magic. Just for some examples, blah, blah, blah. Will this be the case for the default dwarven race from the myth release onward relative to the other races? Toady says it's really too early to say exactly what we'll need. When they aren't magic users themselves, it has been a standard way of giving them a competitive advantage, an additional way to distinguish them from humans. Though I'm not sure we'll go the same way. Generally, there are a lot of mostly not conflicting dwarven tropes to reckon with once magic comes into play, such as runes, geomancy, resistance, good priests, etc. And we'll have to decide whether we're going to try to put any sort of authorial edge on it, or if we embrace the normal ways. We've kind of been doing both up to this point and can continue very well to do so. Our elves and goblins are slightly more weird/specific, really, and we'll see how that plays out. Okay, question from Immortal D. I don't know why my cursor has a question mark on it, but it does. I'll put that maybe not off the top of the screen. Okay, so question from Immortal D. When was the last time you took a vacation? I was actually very interested in this myself. Are you planning an extended holiday before starting on the myth and magic, the big wait? Just want to make sure you properly decompress every once in a while. Toady says it depends on how you count certain things, I guess. The speaking trips I go on don't exactly feel like vacations since there's an element of work involved, but they aren't all bad either. I don't recall my last proper vacation. The last few Augusts have certainly been candidate months for them, as people have mentioned in here. And he obviously mentioned in the August update, just with the weather, that he wasn't able to get much done. It might make for a good time to take a vacation each year, which he obviously deserves. And last thing we want is our wonderful Tarn Adams to get overworked and throw in the towel on Dwarf Fortress. So, question from Wigglepuff. Will the deities made in World Gen ever demand an amount of worship? If that amount is not met, will they send catastrophic events to the fortress? It's certainly a reasonable enough model, and we'll have to see what we get to, says Toady, especially as it regards fortress-wide or region-level disasters. We've promised that there will be disasters of that scope, so if somebody releases the crack on you, well, maybe you shouldn't have provoked your own destruction. So, could be interesting, add a little bit more to the deity interaction. Question from Real Bang. In your presentation, you said that we can send our companions to do mischief and that it's similar to raid menu in fort mode. We'll be able to specify mischief, like send some guys on raid, raise, stealing artifact mission, and how will they find the adventurer when they finish with their mission? Like if I send someone to form links, I think he should come back and tell about links that have been formed / mischiefs that he has done. So how will he find me in the big world map? Tony says he's leaning towards the rendezvous option, especially since we already have basic adventurer sites. If there's an additional option that doesn't involve adventurer sites, like meet me at pre-existing tavern X in 2 weeks, all the better. The mischief options will align with whatever options the post-world gen villains have for their mission orders. My expectation is that this will include general and specific options, but we'll have to see exactly what happens when the simulation gets a say. So I think that makes sense. I wouldn't actually have expected anything more than meet back at our adventurer site that we built, but the ability to potentially meet at some tavern or something obviously be much more convenient if you're nowhere near your adventurer site. Of course, I guess you could always just build one real quick and say, let's meet back here at this tree. Okay, question from Real Bang again. Will we be able to do mischief in fort mode? Make agents, send them to elven forests, make them start a war with humans, and do something else? Tony says, seems likely. Once adventurers can do it, it would be an easy add anyway, and we were already planning on doing off-site investigations at the very least. Question from Doody Doo. He says most of his questions are related to adventure mode. Will NPCs use dual wielding? Will dwarves in the fortress use 2 weapons at once and simultaneously dual wielding attacks? Tony says they just need to be given a second weapon sometimes and taught what to do, just haven't got to it. Question 2, how good will the disguise system be made? Will it be possible to use magic and special tools to disguise oneself, like fake beards, makeup scars, for instance, or even a complete full-body illusion that makes a human appear to talk and talk as an elf? Why anyone would want to do that, I have no idea. But Toady says, I have no idea what we'll be able to do here in the end. The recent identity rewrite puts us in a better position since there's a visual component to knowledge of other critters now. It needs work, though, to get the systems you describe. Question 3. Will it be possible to effectively impersonate someone to gain some benefit of their position, like giving some bad orders to the army of your enemy civilization and stuff? Tony says, we aren't there yet, but the changes we've made would effectively support that if you could get somebody to think you were somebody else, and there were any person-driven orders of the kind you described. The latter is possibly coming up as it relates to positions and schemes. Question 5. Haven't really encountered it so far, so I'll ask, will different civs of the same race wage war against each other? Tony says there are ethic checks that make them like each other, usually, though humans have random ethics values, so they should dislike each other on occasion. Religious differences can also do it. Of course, bugs are also possible. Question 6. Will we have explosives, magical or normal, to use as a mining and or military tool? Will invaders use them to destroy dwarven fortifications? Tony says magic that blows stuff up seems popular enough. Other stuff that blows stuff up is an intermittent topic, so we're more or less ambivalent on it. We don't usually go for guns, etc. in our fantasy settings, but as we go, that sort of thing might end up more supported by modding, etc. Especially as certain magic items start to look a bit like their technological counterpart at times. If vanilla ended up with a basic black powder option, I wouldn't be shocked either, as it's well within the tech cutoff, 1400 AD, and it's easy to add world gen parameters switches to suit tastes. Question from Real Bang again. Really chiming in with the questions that I think are worth asking, apparently. Or maybe he was just in there a lot anyways. What major bugs are you going to fix before the big wait? Toy says, bugs, certainly the stress-broken social stuff still needs some work. And I'll chime in here with an amen on that. Otherwise, I'm just going to set aside some time for it, mainly working with the bug tracker. Keeping my own list of priority bugs before fixed time is usually pointless, though I have several and they tend to become outdated. Clearly, the end of year estimate is going to give way to whatever's been going on with the pre-villain stuff, so we're going to go on a bit into 2019 before the big wait happens. Exactly how far is unclear and certainly won't be until the villains are ready. Just another one where I'm very happy to hear Tony say he's going to work on the stress and social broken stuff, since that was rough in the last Fortress. All right, question from Magistrum. Because I think our thousands of individual threads for accounting would be way easier with how many meters of thread or how many square meters of cloth. Liters of water would make me feel more comfortable than 3 waters. Do you plan on adding measurement units for values? Would it be metric? Would civs have their own measurements? So if you have, you're making thread for clothes for your hospital, like you're dealing with tens of thousands of units at a time. So something like square meters, or what's the other one? I don't remember. But anyways, lengths of cloth and so forth. And Toady says, yeah, we were late here and now it's a mess. I'm sure we're going to address it. Internally, we've been slowly moving over to, for example, cubic centimeters for a unit of volume, but we need to have the internal conversions done before we can think about sieve-based ones. Would be cool, naturally, and I wouldn't mind having, say, an optional toggle between metric and in-universe measurements if we get there. I'm on the fence. I think it would be cool, actually, to have a chance or a choice in having some randomized in-universe measurements that differ between the sieves. Obviously, it's a pain enough for a lot of people just to deal with imperial and metric measurements, but what can you do? As long as it's optional, I think it's probably a fabulous idea if he wants to spend time working on that. Question from Falk. I made it through a vault and now I have a cute new friend made of filth and grime. I think this is hypothetical. What will befriending such a creature mean for its role as a villain? Will it still generate schemes for its home civ? Can it be made to very easily influence the civ it was running? Will people notice its runoff with that supposed monster hunter from faraway civilization, elevate a different new ruler? Could it be switched to using the swapping between adventurers interface upon joining your party, since it's a pretty big investment to get? If it's sent off screen, can it do its own schemes? And please, oh please, can I try to have its controller assassinated? Or can it try to have its controller assassinated? This is something I'm not really familiar with. Apparently I've forgotten or something, or never knew about it, of course. But it seems like a magical option for controlling another historical fig. And Toady says, as long as you're dragging it around, it won't be able to do anything. If you leave it on its own by command, it'll likely still sit there. The only hope would be to give it a general networking order, most likely, and then whatever skills it has in this area would come into play. Pretty sure people won't notice it is under your control unless I specifically code that in, since the name command system isn't entity/civ driven. I suppose it should be controllable in party mode, that there are certain questions there that are unresolved, and won't be until we understand magic better, at which point it becomes a more clear-cut design issue concerning loyalty/harm to self, etc. Hopefully it will hate you, Whether that means it will try to have you killed is up to post-world gen mechanics. If you let it get off the leash, it could very well plot to have you killed just on the general revenge principle, but it would have to have a network first, which the player might be foolish enough to give it if it proves good at that task. So, oddly optimistic here. I put this in specifically just because it shows the potential for just these emergent interactions that come from playing the game. So it's not something that is like specifically programmed in, but it becomes an option because of all the systems that have been put in place. And if it happens, it'll happen very organically based on essentially how the thing is feeling, what sort of power you give it, And I think that's really neat. Even though I don't see myself going around magically, befriending monsters and stuff, I just love that this kind of stuff is in the game. All right, we're about 15 minutes in and about halfway done with the question, so I think we're going to try to keep this to one episode, hopefully. If it's going to go much longer, I will try to break it into two. Question from somebody. I'm not even going to try. Will boogeymen be used in villain plots, or will they be removed/fixed in myth and magic release? Good question, name I can't pronounce, because I hate boogeymen. Boogeymen are always, Tony says, boogeymen are always sitting on some list or another to get them properly changed or made more interesting or less common or whatever. This is true now pre-wait. We will see what happens, I guess. No plans to use them in villain plots. Yes, please make them at least interesting, not more interesting. Or, less common or just don't exist would be great. Little opining there by myself. Question from Shonai Dweller. Does this mean the merchants who visit your fortress will now be actual existing merchants who've traveled across the map from some place to get to you? Are they still the magically generated kind? This is talking about the merchant kind of stuff that he was talking about in the updates from the last month, which I have covered. If you want to go check that video, if you have no idea what he's talking about. And Todi answers, the hope and current to-do item is that human merchants will indeed be taken from the trading company pool if they are available. It's probably early to have them actually move on the map, though, since we don't have an economy. Though perhaps they can fake trade or something. Haven't got to post-world gen yet. We won't have the luxury with, say, elves, and the dwarves are still linked to your home civ and too strong away, so small steps, but it is something. That it is. All right, question from Fantastic Dwarf. Do traveling merchants accompany trade caravans in scheduled visits, or do they arrive individually? I expect they'll replace the scheduled visit, says Todi, though in some previous notes we did have more of a random year-round feel to the depot to be linked with fairs and other matters. Simple option is the scheduled one. If we somehow luck out and the post-world gen movement goes really smoothly, we might have more. I think that's an interesting concept. So one of my issues, I don't know how many people share this. I'd be interested to hear in the comments. But I spend an inordinate amount of time dealing with trading when it happens in the game. And I like that. Yet at the same time, it's not good for video, so I try to cut it out. But I don't know. So I'm torn. I really think it would be cool to have travelers come with some sort of context or theme, such as, there's a fair either happening in your civilization or next door, and they bring specific wares because of that, like, I don't know, more animals, petting zoos, I don't know. I think that could be cool, or other undisclosed matters he mentions. I don't really know what could potentially do that. Maybe a fortress gets knocked over or something, or a human town or something, and all the merchants, you flee ahead of time, so now they got tons of wares they're trying to unload really cheap before they can set up again. I don't know, but I would like some more kind of narrative around the caravans. I think that would be cool. Okay, question from Rockfed. As Dwarf Fortress gets more complex, how do you check for bugs? It seems too complex to exhaustively search the event space, but just turning it on and seeing what pops out seems likely to miss things. Maybe I should specifically ask how you came to check what happened to the trade warehouse when the fortress got hit by a forgotten beast. And he is talking about one of the updates, the last one of October, where he talks about a fortress that gets demolished, by a forgotten beast, and a trade company that had set up their what do you call it? Promoted him to like head of the trade outpost or something. Cool bug. Obviously, doesn't make any sense. You can again hear about that if you read or listen to the update video I did, but Tony says, as for bugs, I just try my best to make sure every block of code gets a run through. This often involves logging data, and for stuff like what I'm doing now, checking through legends. So it's through luck/diligence that I spotted the Forgotten Beast assignment. And for that kind of bug, it'll always come down to a certain amount of testing, since it was missing a piece of edge case logic rather than a fault with existing logic or a crash. And I can only increase my chances by doing a bit more checking and being attentive. Structurally, I can prevent bugs like this, for instance, homogenizing checks for appropriate position holders, etc., and make those corrections and take preventive steps when I can. But there are limits there, and I am also still sloppy sometimes. But generally, individual additions to the code can be given a proper workout without the overall complexity impacting whether or not they work as intended. In some small sense, the overall weird, buggy nature of the game is perhaps confirmation that it is just a giant trundling mess that we heard as it rolls about at this point. So I added that in just for the programmers out there who are interested in that sort of stuff. Obviously, he doesn't mention it here, but he has the Mantis bug system that you can use to log your bugs with him, attach save files. We've covered this in a previous Future of the Fortress. So, you know, I think he does, and he's mentioned before that he does, he relies a lot on users, on us, to submit bugs so that he at least knows about them, and to submit saves, because he can't really, he doesn't have the time to start, you know, new games from scratch to try to make a bug appear. Especially if it's a late game bug where, you know, it's going to take hours and hours of playthrough to get to that point. But I do like how he how he describes the game as perhaps a giant trundling mess that we just heard around as it rolls about at this point. Like anything good should be. That's what we love about Dwarf Fortress, right? It just goes its own way, whether it was intentional or not. Question from Goots. How raw-oriented are the new companies, religions, organizations? While I expect it's mostly hard-coded, will they respect ethics and values? Like an elf company refusing to buy or sell wood, or a civilization who's absolutely disgusted by commerce, completely lacking companies in the first place? If you don't know, when he says how raw-oriented, he means the raws, which are essentially text-based classification for everything that's in the game, or most everything that's in the game, that can be very easily modded or added to. Yeah, Toady says, the commerce value is a prereq for company formation already, but as stated above in a question I didn't quote, I think, it was too restrictive to disallow companies to use trade routes in places that don't value commerce. There's some more specific work that needs to be done. The trade goods mimic the trade route. I don't remember if World Gen respected ethics properly in the mostly invisible existing trade system, but it just follows that. Number 2, would an organization that was controlled by a villain or completely corrupted by a villainous plot act villainous? Killing a villain is one thing, but killing an entire evil corporation or cult is another thing entirely. Toady says they act through their leaders right now, so replacing the head with a non-villainous head who isn't corrupted will clean their behavior up. If every position holder is compromised, it would be difficult to clean up, but it's still just those people. We are missing that notion of the broader culture of the membership, but there isn't an applicable situation right now. That is, we haven't introduced value drift more broadly into entities, just in that specific way with books and philosophers. If we did value drift a sieve towards worse values, then if a position holder is drawn from the non-historical pool, you'd have that value set in leadership finally. That's kind of indirect, though. The hist-fig entity population interface is still somewhat weird. So, just more detail in the villainous kind of hierarchy kind of stuff, which is always interesting. I'm looking forward to the update. All right, question 3. In the absurd case that this does happen, potential bugs notwithstanding, could your entire fortress be roped into a villainous plot and you remain blissfully unawares? Toady says your fortress is completely historical, so it's actually more susceptible to this kind of thing and theoretically could run into such a mess. We'll see how likely that is when I get to the Fort Mode editions. It might not be that common if a large portion of the dwarves turn out to be incorruptible for whatever reason. Ideally, the villains would be able to work on a lot of your people, given enough effort and assassinate, etc. the rest. At that point, yeah, your fort would be a corrupted dump. Play-wise, this could be fairly petty, like your crafts are being smuggled out, and then when you tell your sheriff to do something about it, they ignore you, and then you fire your sheriff and put another one in, and they ignore you too. Then the migrants all arrive, I guess, and you could put them all in power positions since they're more likely to be clean. Then you could have everyone else arrested and locked up forever. Villainous resistance to executing that plan is under consideration, but even if the simple plan works, you'd certainly be paying a price for your earlier lack of crime fighting. The assumption being here that you can root out corruption if you pay attention to witness reports, clues, etc., if we get that working. Just another lovely just concept of where Dwarf Fortress can go, and I love it. I added this specifically for that response. Question from Real Bang. Will villains continue doing their evil stuff after World Gen is finished? I wonder if I can start Adventurer and just pass over some villain like a Necromancer. Will he continue doing his net building, getting corpses, etc., so when I come back to this plot it would be even worse, in worse case than when I first saw it? Will we be able to observe bandits attacking targeted people? Sorry for stumbling over that, but I don't know if that was entirely my fault. Tony says this is the plan, to try to keep World Gen and post-World Gen editions as close together as we can. There are always hiccups with this, but we're going to make an effort. Naturally, villain mission goals like Assassinate X might look much more silly zoomed in than they do when you are farther away, as we won't be able to teach them very much about discretion, etc. But that's fine for now. They'll either wait to be offloaded or be indiscreet, depending on my programming mood that day, most likely. Question 2. Will some villainous plots be solved by someone else, at least in World Gen? Tony says counterintelligence is a big part of this. Example, Keeper of the Seals position will be kept busy. They, of course, won't be doing actual investigations the same way you'll be doing them, especially on this first pass, but they will be able to spot corrupt people at times in some abstract sense. Number 3, you mentioned small crimes, so should we expect prison courthouse type buildings where they will go if being caught? Or will this be worked on later in Law Arc? Tony says most of this will probably wait. Dwarven Justice hasn't relied upon courts at this point, so we can probably continue on without them, and the law stuff is clearly important here. Alright, question from Renarin21. Will plotting/intrigue mechanics ever be generalized and used by non-villains for non-villainous ends? Tony says, yeah, even in the most innocuous cases, the frameworks we are putting into place will be available for use. When we actually get to such uses is another matter entirely, but it's nice to have it all there in a general way. In fact, agreements used for adventure mode party membership and guides are being used as the principal framework for villainous agents. So we are already using non-villainous mechanics to create villainous ones, which I think is really cool. Obviously, work smart, not hard. But I also kind of wonder, maybe with this kind of generic framework that's so easily adapted to other concepts, or similar concepts at least, that perhaps we could see some really cool mods from some really clever people. People much more clever than I. Question from Hapchazard. 1A, will the intricacies of a villain's schemes depend on their intelligence, so that there's a difference between the plots of some random street thug and an experienced court spy master and a god of deception? Tony says, to some extent, though World Gen can't always be picky due to the volume of what we're working with sometimes. We have basic stat skills anyways. And part B, speaking of schemes, I remember you talking about the investigative process in the game and piquing my interest. What kind of nonverbal clues will the player be able to encounter when investigating something? Letters, how to place items, gold coins from a specific location that were used as a bribe, etc. Tony says it's not entirely clear what we'll actually be able to pull off here. Letters are the easiest since we don't have to actually write their contents, and they can assert whatever facts we need the player to know. Then we'll try to step down from there to make it more interesting using cultural markers/symbols, items, spatter, whatever we have available, which is quite a lot by now. If we don't find a way to make that clear, we may have to highlight it in pretty obvious ways on a skill roll or whatever, but at the very least, it'll be good atmosphere. which is all you can ask. I do like the idea of some bit more complex stuff like gold coins from specific locations used as a clue, since the game does have a bunch of different types of coins that, are somewhat worthless outside of their originating civilization. But again, I'm excited. I can't wait to see what the villainous and investigative kind of stuff in the next update is going to be like. I think it's going to be really cool. Question C, 1C that is, are there any plans to improve the observer skill in the villain update? What kind of improvements do you envision? Tony says he doesn't have a specific plan at this point. It's kind of thing where the day we add in nonverbal clues, we can be like, oh, cool, yeah, observer plus intrigue skill equals Q for player on this clue item or whatever. If we're lucky, we can make it feel less kludgy. I like that. Right now, observer is a very important skill, I feel, for any adventurer anyways. If you don't want to be ambushed, you want to be able to understand what's going on around you in the world. And obviously, it would be a even greater benefit to someone once all this villainous stuff is in place. And last question, question 2. Will characters that are immortal / have extremely long lifespans, elves, magical creatures, deities, mortals, augmented by life-prolonging magic, etc., that are intelligent enough to potentially have schemes that span centuries until they come to fruition, will they be able to have numerous contingencies and backup plans in the cards if things deviate from their predicted course? In general, how complex could plots get when dealing with creatures of vast intelligence and age? And luckily, his answer just barely fits because I can't scroll anymore. I guess I can do something like that. And Tony says, I'm limited myself in not possessing either too advanced age or vast intelligence, so schemes will likely be pathetic, cosmically speaking. A way to be self-depreciating there, Tony. I love it. Still, we have the computer to do some bookkeeping for us. So if an elf, goblin, necro agent is activated at just the right time, 200 years after being corrupted, the villain will sure seem smart. It's difficult to plan for second or third order contingencies generally, but just a small collection of precautions / chain events will come off seeming pretty cool, I think. And the immortal villains that are obsessed with network building should end up with quite a bit of material that will have to be replaced frequently. I'm assuming the things that will have to be replaced are people that don't live forever. Anyways, a very amusing answer in general, and I do believe, Tody, that you are fairly intelligent and can make for some good schemes. You're definitely imaginative, which I think is the most important part. And yeah, you're old enough to have some experience under your belt there. I actually don't remember how old he is. I think we're around the same age. I think he's in his late 30s, though I profusely apologize if I'm not even close there. No, that Tony will watch this anyways. But yeah, so that is the Future of the Fortress summary. Just my thoughts on the ones that interested me and I thought might interest you. Obviously, you can read all of them to your heart's content and more by checking out the links in the description or just going to bay12games.com/dwarves and then go to, just click on the link for Future of the Fortress, or you could go to the, the forums, which are actually intensely entertaining in their own right. If you never just browsed around in them and lurked some, then I highly recommend it. There's some really funny stuff in there. But it's just kind of a play it out kind of thing. I'm going to bring up the website real quick. One of the other things he always does each month is he does the kind of monthly report on how things are going just from supporters and the like. And there's always a little bit more information in here, which I enjoy reading. In the past, I haven't put it up here too often, but I'm going to now. So really, the interesting stuff is usually under Fun with Numbers. He says, thanks for all the help. The goal is to finally arrive at villainous plots this month after all the feature delay. That month would be November, by the way. Though there are still more pre-villain features to be added, with the additional stress / etc. fixes, thank you, that we wanted to do as well before the big wait. I'm pretty sure this will be spilling into next year now, as much as I wanted to get started on Magic with the beginning of 2019. Should be cool, though, as we'll be leaving you with something that should be quite entertaining and hopefully relatively stable as well. That would be great. He says he has got a final speaking engagement of the year, and it's next week, which I'm sure has already come and passed since it's halfway through the month now. He says he'll be talking at Game Z Festival or Games Festival about the emergent narrative design decisions and so forth in Dwarf Fortress. I look forward to hopefully getting a chance to listen to that. I hope that it will be put up on YouTube or something. And then you can see the income he's gotten from generous people such as yourself who support the game. And as you can see, things are staying fairly steady. I know he always gets a big boost near the end of the year. That's typically when I do all my kind of monetary giving stuff as well. So I am certainly due to send something his way. If you don't have the money or, whatever, no worries, I'm sure. But if you do and you've enjoyed the game and gotten hundreds of hours of entertainment out of it like me, consider, maybe throwing a couple bucks his way. And I am done panhandling for Toady now, so thanks for listening, folks. And I do just want to go back real quick. And I think the crayon art rewards are amazing. No matter what you give, essentially, if it covers the processing for the donation, they'll give you either a story or a crayon art reward. And I really love mine. I got it posted on my wall. So it's really neat. I mean, you could go on Kickstarter and have to go to like the really high valued backing options before you would get a hand drawn picture for yourself by the developer and his brother, who is obviously involved very intimately with the game as well, but I just don't think does any of the programming. So I think that's really cool. But anyways, thanks for watching, folks. If you haven't caught just the update for what he's been working on this month, I recommend checking it out, and I will see you all next month. And probably before then, hopefully, as well. Bye-bye.